All right, everyone. So again, good morning, good afternoon, no matter where it is that you're tuning in from. This is our second Careers in Tech Recruiter Roundtable live podcast event. I am your host, Brian Antolin, Program Manager at LineRun, and we're so very happy and fortunate to have two incredible recruiting leaders joining us to share their insight and perspective on careers in tech and the things you need to know in order to prepare for careers in tech. They include Deitrick Franklin, Program Manager for University Recruiting at Lyft, and Lauren Newton, Head of Recruitment at Medium. So before we get to our conversation, just a little bit about our organization in case you're new to us. LineRun is an experiential career and industry education platform for tomorrow's workforce. We empower our community of leaders to connect, innovate, and grow through media, events, and programs such as today's session. We invite you to check out our website, www.linerun.co, to learn more about our podcasts, classes, and career accelerator programs. So, LineRun. With that, each of our panelists will briefly introduce themselves, explain a little bit more about their journey into tech and what they do on a daily basis. And today we're going to start with Deitrick.
Ooh, go first. Yay. Well, hey, everybody. I'm Deitrick Franklin. I was a former university recruiter at Lyft, and then I just transitioned into my new role, which is the program manager for our newly branded team, Early Talent Programs at Lyft. So very excited to be here on the call with you all today and just go through some questions, hopefully answer some of your questions. Journey into tech, right? My journey, very unique journey, I will say. My background is mechanical engineering. So I actually went to school for mechanical engineering. I went to University of Pittsburgh. Shout out to anybody that goes to Pittsburgh, H2P. I also got a master's degree in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech. Shout out to all my yellow jackets. We already know, Ramblin' Rex. Went to school, did mechanical engineering, was like, oh, I'm gonna be a mechanical engineer, and went straight into the oil and gas industry, worked at a oil and gas company for 5 years as a facilities engineer, and then realized that a lot of people around me as engineers did not look like me in terms of my skin color, racial ethnicity. I'm like, where are Black engineers? Where are Black engineering managers? Where are Black directors? Like, where are people that I can go to and connect with on a deeper level to gain a lot of mentorship guidance as I become an engineer? And so I went about going into recruiting for that company and would recruit young talent, Black, Latinx, Indigenous groups of people into the company as interns and tried to transition into that side of the business. However, they were like, well, we paid you to be an engineer. You have an engineering degree. Why would we want to make you an HR professional? I said, you know what? Completely understand what you're saying. I'm going to leave and find the job on my own. So Lyft took a chance on me, and here I am.
That's amazing. And just to hear all the twists and turns to get to a place that not only where you can grow as you just have into your new position, but also where you're appreciated and your efforts are appreciated, I think is just really incredible. And going from your story, Deitrick, love to also hear from Lauren.
Hey everyone, I'm Lauren Newton. I'm currently the head of recruiting at Medium, which, if you don't know, we are an open platform for readers and writers to come share and consume really big, meaningful ideas. Before I was at Medium, I was at Facebook and Instagram for a few years. Before that, I was with Refinery 29. And before that, I was working as a recruiter on the agency side of things. So in my current role, I'm a people leader first. So I have a team of 6 people that work with me, and they're mainly executional. I would say about 30% of the time, I still work actively on open requisitions and fill positions. The other 70% of the time, I am a people manager. I'm fostering the growth on my team. I am working on sort of like strategy and forecasting for the company, things like that. But I do believe that once you're a recruiter, you're always a recruiter. It's very hard to sort of like get away from that aspect of the job. My sort of journey into tech is also a little bit different. I think that everybody that works in recruiting sort of falls into it somehow. So in a past life, I was an artist. I went to school for photography, painting, art history, etc., and studied the fine arts. And after school, I realized that the one thing that they don't really teach you in art school, at least back then, was the business aspect of things. And so I needed a job. And so I got called to be a creative recruiter. And so I started out my career and have spent a lot of time in my career working mainly in the creative space, either in a more traditional sense, in hiring like art directors, designers, videographers, et cetera, and then transitioned into the product and tech world when I went over to Facebook. And I've remained there. Medium is a very interesting sort of blend of those both worlds. We have a lot of folks that come from like more traditional legacy companies, and a lot of folks that are coming straight out of big tech and working in our engineering and product teams and whatnot. That's about it. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. And you're definitely right. I think anyone who's in recruiting, they have some type of mix of different experiences that they bring to the table. And I really believe that that's really what makes all of you shine, is the fact that you can relate to people on different levels. And it's a really important skill to have. And so thank you both for sharing your personal journeys, just so that we can have a little bit more context into how you really view your roles as both working with people and also getting people to work at your companies. And with that, I'd love to start with our first question. And of course, 2020, not the year that we thought it would be. A lot of disruption, a lot of changes, of course. Probably the most notable is that we're all in our living rooms or in our friends' living rooms talking. So, with the global pandemic disrupting the normal course of business, how has your company's hiring strategy and process changed and adapted to all of this disruption? And Lauren, I'd love to start with you first.
Yeah, sure. So, and first of all, we really quickly pivoted to adapt and make all of our interview process and onboarding process fully remote. Luckily, pre-pandemic, we had about 20% of our work staff was already fully remote, and we were already hosting those interviews fully remote anyway. And so we had some really good sort of foundational work already in place in order to go 100% remote when it comes to interviewing and onboarding. And so that transition was, I think, a little bit easier for us because we were already doing it. It was just about like scaling the practice, right? So we took everything remote. We did slow down for a bit. We didn't stop hiring, but we did slow down for a bit just because like we didn't know when we were going back to the office. If you remember, we thought we were going back in like maybe 6 weeks, and now we're not going back until next August. And so we did slow down for a bit. Now I think that we know that we are stuck in place. We're not opening our offices anytime soon. We are speeding up hiring again, which is nice. So we adapted interviewing to go 100% remote. We also made all of our roles, mostly, I would say 95% of our roles, available to anybody anywhere in the US, where before a lot of our roles either were, housed in San Francisco or New York, where our offices were. We opened everything up to be fully remote because it really doesn't matter where you are, and we're working successfully in this way. And then we also took a look at how we onboard people. I mean, I think a big part of our onboarding, even if you were going to be in a fully remote role, we still flew you into an office so that you could meet your team in person and spend time with the team and see the office and everything like that. And so we've had to rethink the way that we onboard people in order to reflect that same sort of feeling you get when you are, meeting your entire team and everything like that. So we've sort of expanded that practice. And I think it is much more intentionally high touch instead of sort of just saying, oh, well, you know, the person is going to be in the office. They can walk by somebody's desk and say hi, or they can go out to lunch or happy hour with the team or whatever. We're much more intentional about all of the touch points we create for our new people.
That is so important, Lauren, like being intentional, especially in a remote environment. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. So when coronavirus pandemic hit us, it wasn't that big of a transition as far as hiring goes, because in the university space, we see such high volume. You know, I'm sure, Lauren, if you have a university team at Medium, which you probably do, y'all see the same volumes. Like, it is outrageous. And so in order to be able to handle those volumes, we always have done our interviews remotely. For niche roles in university, like data science or design, those used to be on site. And then last year, even before the pandemic, we transitioned them into fully remote. So our interviewing strategy had been completely remote before the pandemic hit. So when it occurred for the university aspect, we weren't that impacted from a standpoint of like, oh, how are we going to be able to interview people? I think the biggest impact that hit us was, how do we execute a program remotely? Because we interview remotely, but we always brought the interns to an office. You know, our Lyft turns were in like 5 different offices, and now we have them not only everywhere nationally, but we have them international too. How do we get laptops to them? How do we make sure they have the right equipment? How do we get them onboarded appropriately? How do we get them connected with their team members in a virtual setting? How do we create a sense of community when everybody's so spread out, right? So that was the biggest challenge for us. We went into like overdrive. It was like, okay, we need to create this doc because we had to train managers and mentors of how to actually handle a remote intern. This is their first time ever actually managing interns remotely. And it's not the same as when you're managing, you know, your current team members and you already have built relationships with them. So it's comfortable, right? You go into a virtual setting, it's like, oh, hey, I know you. You're getting somebody new, somebody that needs training and wants and is willing to learn before going into full-time work. So I think updating our manager and mentor training docs, updating our onboarding processes, and preparing the interns beforehand, doing like a welcome to Lyft webinar, creating a quarantine guide, you know, things that were fun and interesting, but trying to create this sense of community online was probably the biggest change that we had to do this past year.
Definitely sounds like it's a lot of logistical elements, and definitely the pandemic made us all into, if we weren't already, more logistically focused. And Deitrick, wanted to touch on something you just mentioned about how you had to change that approach and that process for the interns who came in because it's a different type of interaction. Was that more of a top-down thing internally, or were you able to solicit feedback from the interns as well to shape that strategy? How did it work?
Right. Oh, that's a great question. So it was both. Like, you had to tackle both aspects, right? Leadership was very bullish about it. They're like, no, we're keeping the internship program, but we need you and your team as the experts to show us how this is going to work. If you can prove to us that this will work, we'll keep it, we'll run with it, let's go. So it went into every training that we had in person for managers and mentors. We now have to change it to virtual, right? We have to also give them tips and tricks on how to manage an intern remotely, change up some of their engagements, because when you're on site, your manager can see you all the time. So you don't necessarily have to have one-on-ones every week. When you're virtual, you need to have that FaceTime. So making sure that managers are now meeting with their interns one-on-one. But well before the interns joined, we also surveyed them and said, hey, Lyft turns, what do you need? What are you concerned about? I know it's different. Where's the anxiety? Where are the pain points? so that way we can work internally as quick as possible to solve them before you get here. And so a lot of their concerns were just around, how do I connect with my manager and mentor? How do I build relationships with people outside my team? How am I going to convert, to full time? Is the pandemic affecting your hiring numbers? Like, everybody's worried about headcount at this point. So I think getting those concerns from both sides, right? Because we reached out to the managers and mentors too and said, what are you concerned about? And all of them are like, how do I manage somebody remotely that I've never met? So, so getting those concerns ahead of time and then just basically thinking of creative ways to alleviate them really was the strategy that we had. And now we've done it, so we can completely do it again because we are remote till next year. So our interns 2021, you'll be joining us virtually as well, and we got everything in order.
That's amazing. And to hear that, your team and your leadership really took that proverbial bull by the horns and made sure everyone had a say. I think that's so, so important. And also wanted to touch base with Lauren on something you mentioned earlier. We had a question from Oleg from our audience about how the pandemic really shifted, the perspective of the actual work and what the hiring terms are. So obviously everything is remote now, but when you source, he's asking, the positions, is it an open term where you're saying that you don't need to relocate, you can work remotely and it doesn't matter if you are in the Bay or in New York? Or is it that you should really be in that area now because you're going to have to come back sometime eventually? How's that working?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it definitely depends on the role. I would say that for very high level leadership roles, some of them we do prefer to have somebody on site. So for example, we're in the process of hiring a VP of people. That's a role that really benefits, I think, from being in the office with the population and all of that kind of stuff. However, realistically, right now we have sort of a moving target that we're going to say we might open up in August of next year, but also it depends on what the world looks like. If there's no vaccine or if the numbers for COVID go back up, we're not going back to the office. Our first main priority is keeping our people safe and making sure that our people feel comfortable with going back to the office. That also means different things for different people. And so the reality is that some people may never feel comfortable commuting or going back to an office, and that's okay. We're open to people being remote for the rest of their time here. Like, that's totally okay. But there are certain roles that eventually, whenever the role opens up, we would like that person to have some sort of presence within the office. Again, that's mainly for very, very, very senior level roles. For everybody else, we are, if they're located, if they're already like local to one of our offices, again, we're in San Francisco and New York, then they have an option, right? So like, if you start with us now, cool, you will be remote until August of next year and possibly further than that. And when the office is open, you'll have a choice. If you would like to head into an office 1 time a week, 2 times a week, once a month, whatever it is, then cool, you'll have that option. You'll be able to visit the space, you'll be able to work out of our offices, etc. If that time never comes for you and you are local, that's okay too. Or if you are not located locally to one of our offices, that's still okay. If you are and you move, that's still okay. We're being really, really flexible because we understand that the idea of working in an office and going back to an office means so many different things for so many other people. I personally, I have a bit of a long commute from where I am in New Jersey, and I don't want to be on public transportation anytime soon. I have a family. We live with my parents who are of a vulnerable population. They're a little bit older. They have some health ailments. So I'm not bringing COVID-19 home. I'm not up for that ever until a very long time. And so I've sort of made my stance. And the company's fine with that. Like, it's all good. Other people really want to be back in an office and really want to see folks. They might not have the same living situation as me. And like, that's fine. Of course, we'll be going back and taking the appropriate precautions and whatnot. But as far as we're concerned, we're being pretty flexible for the folks who are joining us now as to where they're located, whether they want to be in an office long-term or not.
Yeah, and I'll touch on that really quickly from my end, Lauren, just on like what Lyft is doing. You know, Lyft is a little bit above that decision, is a little bit above my pay grade. So I can't necessarily say whether or not Lyft will want employees to come back to the office or want them to stay remote. I will say that Lyft is being intentional about gauging from employees what they want to do. We've done the surveys to
Yep.
gain information of whether or not employees feel comfortable going back. Because just like you, Lauren, I'm not bringing Rona home.
Right.
Rona's not coming up in this good house. You know, I need Rona to stay outside where they belong. Like, not
Yep.
coming here. So yeah, it just depends. For now, everybody that is starting onboarding with us is onboarding remote. We do have the option where we call it work from home optional until a certain time frame, which is June 30th of next year. And then there is work from office optional, where you can sign up to come into the office, but of course there's certain trainings that you need to take on the protocols and the procedures and processes in place of being in person at the offices. But for our intern class, I will say everyone is remote.
Yeah.
We're not going to run that risk at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great to hear from both of you on that perspective, and apologies if I cut out for a minute or so with my connection. With that, transitioning to more of the actual hiring part, and Deitrick, would love to start with you here. Based on your experience, if you had to pick 3 things that you look for in an application or a resume when evaluating a candidate for a technical position, especially an entry-level position or an internship, what would that be?
Everybody always wants the key thing that's going to make them stand out. And, I would say it's very subjective because recruiters are people. So we look for different things, right? I know for me personally, I look for a well-rounded candidate. So I want to see, do you have the technical chops, of course, like what coding languages are you coding in, but also what are the quantitative results from the work that you've done? A lot of people show their resume as like a job description. I don't want to know your job. I want to know the results. So that way I know you're able to be competent in the role for our software engineering internship position per se, right? The second thing I usually look for is like, do you have any outside activities outside of school? Like, are you in leadership? Because those leadership qualities show me that you're able to collaborate and network with people. And you're able to cross-functionally partner with individuals very effectively. So you wouldn't have that issue coming into an internship at Lyft, where more than likely your project's going to involve multiple people, your mentor, your manager, but also a product manager. You might have to deal with some data engineers or data scientists. You might have to go and deal with the design folks. So are you able to network and collaborate effectively? And then I'm just looking for overall interest in Lyft. A lot of people just apply, and understandably so. Everybody wants a job. So we all, in this economy, especially with Rona, we all need employment, right? But some people really stand out when they show like true interest as why they wanted to join my company. What about my company really stood out to them? Was there an impactful situation that happened with my company and it just completely changed their view of like where they want to work for their particular internship? And that type of stuff really stands out, because then I'm like, okay, at least I know this person's going to be very interested. And if they get to an offer stage, then I know I don't necessarily have to compete as heavy with the fangs of the world, right? Where, I'm dealing with a shopper. And not to say that it's a problem shopping, but it does present a little bit of a challenge because I'm trying to fill my roles, and those that are more interested in my company would be more advantageous or quicker to accept the offer, I would say.
Yeah, +1 to everything that Deitrick said. I just to sort of piggyback off of that, it's also just so important. I know that like especially in recent years, it's so it feels very, very, very important to get all of the internship experience that you can get. At the same time, I think it's so important to make sure that there's true interest there, because then you'll get so much more out of your internship. If you come to Medium for an internship, that what we're doing is very specific. It's a very sort of niche sort of area that we're working in. And so having interest, you'll just get so much more value out of your time here. So really making sure that you know why you're applying to this internship, you know why you want the internship, you know what you want to do with your internship. Having all of that information yourself beforehand, it will just like be so much more valuable to you. And also so much easier for us as recruiters to say, oh, okay, this person really wants to come here and learn something and also actively contribute to something. Because especially if you're coming into an internship as an engineer or as a product person or whatnot, you're actively, I mean, here at Medium, you are actively executing on work that we're doing, right? And so just to know that you have that much more interest is so important. I would say that outside of everything that Deitrick said, I mean, you sort of hit on basically everything that like we're looking for as well. I low-key can't even think of anything else because you hit everything. What I will say is that Medium specifically, we actually work, we actually don't, Deitrick, we don't have a university recruiting team or practice, but it's because we work with, for our internship program, we work with a specific group called Code 2040.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we work exclusively with them for all of our internship hiring. That's all on the engineering side of things. We're currently building out an internship program for our editorial team that was supposed to launch right when Rona hit. And so we paused it.
Oh, I know you did.
But listen, but it is going to launch likely next year.
Yeah.
And so then we'll probably build out more of a university team. But we work exclusively with this company called Code 2040, and their main mission is to create opportunities for underrepresented people in the tech space. And so that's why we work exclusively with them to sort of change the landscape of what tech looks like from inside of our company.
I completely agree.
Yeah, and so we've been working with them for years, and also those cohort of interns. I mean, since I've been here, we've seen almost 100% conversion of those folks year over year. They go through an internship program with us. We offer them a role on our team, and they come back when they graduate, which has been really successful and like a really wonderful time. So I think somebody somewhere in the chat asked about like internships at Medium and hiring junior developers. Most of the time, our internship cohort from the summer transitions into our like junior developer sort of roles here. So most of the time, you likely won't see a junior developer role posted on our career site because we're converting people over that like work through internships with us.
Yeah, and I'll touch on that too, because I know a lot of people ask about new grad opportunities at Lyft, like junior level talent. So our internship program is a more conversion-based program where we're literally looking to try and feed the entry-level talent for the business. So we're getting in entry-level talent through an internship. We're teaching them, we're educating them, giving them the mentorship and guidance, but also providing them with a great experience, and then hopefully are able to convert them at the end into our new grad population where they're fresh out of college, ready to tackle the junior level type work that's there.
Yeah, what I will also say is that, especially for my time at Facebook and Instagram, there's a lot of most, I would say, big tech companies, even smaller ones, have some sort of entry program or rotational program for folks that are making a career switch or whatnot. So I would research if you're looking for entry-level positions or if you're looking to make a career change into tech, I would do some research with the companies that you're interested in and see if they have any sort of rotational programs like that that are meant to introduce you and get you into the company at a more junior level.
Yeah, most of the time those are called apprenticeship programs. So Lyft actually has one where this is the third year we're doing it. We're in the interview rounds this week, so it's been crazy on my end. But yeah, a lot of companies do have like apprenticeship level programs or product manager, like associate product manager programs where they're rotational to get entry level talent in.
Exactly. Yeah.
can't agree more with what you both said, especially Deitrick and followed up by Lauren on it's not just putting your skills and your experiences on a resume, but you have to be able to connect you, your story, and apply it to why you should work at that company. And that's one of the top things that I always see people do wrong, no matter what level you're at. They just use one resume for everything and one cover letter for everything. And that's just not the
Definitely
way it
don't do
works.
that.
It's that's just not the way it works now, especially in you heard Deitrick earlier, they get thousands of applications, and you have to do what will you have to add right away what will make you stand out in the first 3 to 5 seconds as someone reads your profile, your application.
And I'll add one little tidbit in there because it does sort of like, it's like, ugh, it's cringeworthy. But a lot of people will sometimes like email just university recruiters at other companies while they're interviewing for other companies and say like, hey, I'm a great candidate. I'm interviewing at Facebook and Apple and, you know, all the things. I'm in the final rounds right now. How can we, you know, speed up my process with your company? And that doesn't come off like, oh, yes, I really want this person. You know, the way it comes off is somewhat arrogant in the fact that you do have these opportunities that you're interviewing for, and you're making a statement like, I'm the best candidate because I'm interviewing at these bigger companies. But these bigger companies are not my company. You know, and so they don't necessarily do what my company does. And I really want to know why you want to be at my company versus you just want to get as many offers as you can, because that's how it comes off. And so most of the time those emails do go unread, or they're not received as you would expect, right? Versus somebody who's might not be interviewing at all, but has a sincere interest in my company, it's going to stand out to me way better than anybody who's competing and trying to get me to compete for them.
Definitely. And I love the analogy of, recruitment and the application process is not let's make a deal. That's just not, that's not what it is. It's find the best fit, but make sure you make your case. It's more a people's court than let's make a deal. So, and Deitrick, you brought up a really interesting point about people reaching out to you on LinkedIn, and I want to throw this out to both of you. We have a question from Tashima in the Q&A on how candidates really should be engaging with recruiters on LinkedIn. Deitrick, you mentioned all the things that you shouldn't do. Anything that you should be doing?
Yeah, and I love to hear Lauren's perspective because she's like head of recruitment, right? So I'm sure you're getting a lot of prospective candidates reaching out, but then also just everybody else. From a university recruiter standpoint, we get slammed. We just, to be completely honest, we get slammed. I probably look at my LinkedIn every day and there's about 30 to 40 new requests. And most of the time they're just blanket requests. Like I can tell it's a student, they want to connect with a recruiter, they send connect. But that's not going to make me want to stand out. Sometimes they'll add a note, but the note is just like, hey, I'd love to learn more about opportunities at blank, right? Because they insert the company name. Could we connect? But it's like, my job as a recruiter is to find top talent, not to tell you where you can be placed. Like that my job is to search for in that role and find top talent that could be successful at this company. And hopefully that top talent is interested very heavily in this company. I can tell you about opportunities, but it's better when you come to me with the opportunities that you're interested in. Because I can tell you about all the opportunities that we're searching for, and you could easily come back and say, oh, great, I want to apply to them all. And it's like, well, then you're not really showing me that you have any particular interests, right? And so I don't know where your skill sets are aligning for the opportunities. So I think, being more specific in the requests when reaching out to recruiters, and also just engage with them on their activities that they post. I post a lot of stuff on my LinkedIn, whether it be just general articles or opportunities or things like this, where I posted, hey, join me on Thursday, I'm going to be a part of this, engage with them in the comments, because I might not be able to accept your connection request, but for those that do stand out, they have engaged with me in the comments. I'm like, who is this person constantly comment? Oh, okay, a student. Let me see what their profile is. Great. Oh, wow. You know, and then I'm trying to move forward because they've started that level of engagement.
Yeah, I would say that it's the same. When you come outside of the like internship level sort of roles, university hiring. We're slammed too. We on average get anywhere from 400 to 900 applications for any role that we're posting, and so it can be a lot. So if a recruiter is not responding to you, it's because there are 900 of you and only one of me, or a team of 6 of us. So that's just some like perspective that don't take it personal. There's just a lot going on in all of our inboxes. Email, people find my email, people find everything, right? So don't take it personal. What I would say is that, to piggyback on what Deitrick said, definitely be specific in what you are looking for, what you are asking of me. Unfortunately, like we don't have the time to like figure out what role is best for you. So asking me to do that work for you is asking me to do that work for you. And so just be mindful of that. Like have a game plan. It's so important for you to have a game plan about what you're interested in, where you want to end up, etc. You know, reaching out to me to work at my company is very different than reaching out to me for career coaching advice or mentorship. Those are 2 different things. So really be intentional with your message. Get my name right. I would not, listen, I have so many people reach out to me and call me Laura, which is like not that far off, but still a very big pet peeve of mine. So like get people's name right. This sort of goes back to Brian, what you were saying before. Make sure that you're editing your cover letters, your resumes, etc., because it is so easy to misspell somebody's name, address the wrong person. And this is at any level. This is not just at like the college level. This is at any level. Make sure that you're really like careful with like the names that you're using when you're reaching out to people. I would also say I get a lot of messages about doing virtual coffee dates, or hopping on phone calls, or nowadays hopping on Zoom, or anything like that. And in a perfect world, I would love to meet with every single person, but again, there could be up to 900 of you folks. So I think a better way of getting that same time with me and your specific questions asked is offering up like, hey, can I email you some questions that you can get back to me on? I will listen. I've told people to do that. Hey, I can't meet for a virtual coffee date, but if you send over some questions, I'm happy to get back to you by the end of the week with these answers. So instead, you know, ask to email me over some questions that I can answer for you at my own, you know, pace and at my own time. I think that's a really good way to sort of stay connected. Again, stay engaged with what we're talking about on our social channels. I think a really good way to sort of stay in contact is like sending me a note on LinkedIn. Hey, I read this really cool thing on Medium. I loved it. Here's why I loved it. Just like to stay top of mind and everything like that. It also shows that like you're a user of the product. You are reading on our platform, and then all of that kind of stuff. You're sort of making those connections for me to like continue remembering you. Yeah, I would say that's it.
You really touched on so many different things, and I want to double click on one thing in particular. You know, 900 people messaging you versus you. And that's really the reason why we started this event, sharing your stories, because we have to remember recruiters aren't just people behind a machine, they are people. And the more you can relate to them as people, as both Lauren and Deitrick have eloquently put it over the past few minutes, relate to them and respect their time. So one thing that a lot of students really don't understand at this point is time is a commodity that we don't have enough of. So the more you can do the other person's homework for them, especially if you're asking them to do something for you and there's no direct benefit to them, the better off you are. So if anything you were to get out of this event, it's respect people's time, make sure you're relevant, and also just make sure that you do as much of the homework for the person you're reaching out to as possible. And on the note of staying engaged on social media and also this shift to online learning, we have this question from Amanda about the differences between, applying for a job and doing an interview over the phone or in person in an office versus Zoom, and what tips you have on doing a Zoom interview versus one of the other ways. And Lauren, we'd love to start with you first.
Yeah, for sure. I think I saw up in the chat about like the lack of like personal connection on Zoom. And I want to challenge that and say that I think it's really important for us to normalize connecting over Zoom as much as we possibly can, in order to build up that personalized sort of aspect of things, especially like we've just established that both of our companies are going to be remote until next summer. And so this is something that we should really get used to. We are working day in and day out in a virtual space with our own teams. And so it's not just the interview that you have to think about being virtual. You are throwing yourself into starting a new job in a fully virtual space. And so it's really important to, ignore what might feel like initially a lack of personal connection over Zoom, and just make sure that you are working really hard to recreate or reestablish what those personal connections can be over Zoom. Because like I said, we're going to be in this world for a very, very long time. And so I encourage you all to treat a Zoom interview and a Zoom meeting or a Zoom call, whatever, treat it as if you're in a regular interview. Wear what makes you feel comfortable. Wear, without that being pajamas. Dress the way that you would in going to an interview. That might not be like your full suit, but at the same time, you still want to feel comfortable and confident in yourself. Make sure you can take extra steps to make sure that the space around you makes you feel comfortable, that you have a good pair of headphones that drowns out all the sound. That's why I have on these big headphones, because I have a kid and a dog and other people in the house, and I don't want to hear them because I'm easily distracted. So make sure you have a good pair of headphones that works for you. Like, there's so many things that you can do to make yourself feel more comfortable on Zoom, especially in an interview setting. And again, I just encourage everyone to start treating Zoom as if this is the space we're going to be in for a really long time, because it is. And I think that it gets easier. That I was not comfortable on Zoom. I like being in rooms with people to an extent. And so it was a transition period for me to get comfortable and like normalize you all just seeing me cut off from here and all of that kind of stuff. It took me a while to figure out, okay, what kind of light do I need? What kind of room do I need to be in? Where should I be in my house? Where's the best connection? All of that kind of stuff. And the faster you do that, I think the easier interviews will come to you, and the more comfortable you'll feel in this element.
Ooh, preach. You gave such good tips. Oh my gosh. Look, I get it. We're all zoomed out. I am zoomed out. It's like every time I open Zoom or Google Meets, I'm like, oh God, here we go again, camera on. We get it. But like you said, it is the world that we live in. This is what the times are. This is what it's going to be. So you have to make it the best that you can. If you are able to create that environment around you to where you feel like, okay, I'm at least in an office and the other person's in the office too, and create that mental mindset of, I am at the office taking this interview through a video camera that they have at the office. Sometimes, interviews are done at the office and there's video cameras in that conference room and you're talking with people in other locations, because they could be in New York, London, Singapore, all these different locations. So virtual interviewing shouldn't be as difficult or as different, I would say. And make it clear that if this is new for you, there may be some unexpected things that might occur. Set that expectation from the front to say like, hey, this is my first time doing a virtual interview, or this is just my first few times, and I noticed this happened previously. So if it happens again, I absolutely apologize. And people are understanding. Like everybody had to go from working in an office to working from home where their situation might not be the best, right? Like right now, I'm in different state. I'm in Texas, shout out to Bucky's, and I'm at my friend's home, right? And so I'm using her Wi-Fi. I'm in her guest room having this conversation with you all now. But if her Wi-Fi goes out, there's not much I can do. So it's, taking on those challenges and recognizing that and making it known up front. So that way you ease that comfortability between you and the interviewer before you get into your interview. And then just, I would say, conduct the interview as you normally would. Show your personality, show your interest, make it clear why your thought process as you're going through the interview, and engage with them in conversation. Don't just sit there quietly while you work through a problem, because then that's gonna make it what? Awkward. And we don't wanna be awkward, like we don't. So I would definitely start to get used to this and just try to best set up as much as you can. And a note about pajamas, I will say this. There are times where I just have on a shirt and I won't have on I'll have on pajama pants. And as long as I know what I have on, I know I will never pan that camera or stand up during that meeting, and I'll be just fine. That's not one of those times though.
That is totally fine. That is totally fine. Just always remember when your camera is on. Remember to go on mute if you have to. And also just to call back, like I'm a big fan of calling a thing and calling things out so that everybody is aware of what situation I am in. Almost every Zoom call that I get on, especially with folks externally, I'm telling people there's construction right next door. There's a dog in my house. There's a 3-year-old in my house. There's 3 other people in my house. So if you hear a kid scream, if you hear a dog bark, like just be aware of those things, and also know that those things might distract me, but I'm fully present. Something else I think when it comes to the interview setting for you to do as well is that a lot of times we go to interviews with like a pen and paper, a notebook, and we like to take notes in our interviews. We like to bring questions with us. And so the sort of transition I've seen that evolve into having notes up on your computer screen during an interview. And I think that's okay, as long as you are calling it out and saying, hey, I have notes up on my computer. I want to take notes during this conversation. So if you hear any clicking of my keys, or if you see my eyes wandering from the camera to the side of the screen, just know that I'm fully present. I'm just taking notes on our conversation. I do that when I'm interviewing people, and I say, I'm taking notes on this interview. Do you mind? Just letting you know that I am fully present. Because that's another thing, is that I think it's really easy to come off as distracted when you're on Zoom, because you don't know if you should look at yourself or look at the camera or look at the people that are talking or whatever. So calling a thing, calling out all of the potential distractions, I think does a lot to make people just more aware of how you are showing up to that conversation, what might take your attention away for a moment, or just saying that no, my attention is not being taken away, I'm just taking notes on this. So I think that's a really important sort of thing that you can do during interviews to make everything a little bit easier.
Really powerful advice, definitely from both of you, and also just to bring up the fact that being open and being honest with the other person on the other side of the camera does wonders.
Yeah.
And if it's not your best day interviewing.
Yeah. We all know that stuff is going on, and some people are at home in spaces with a lot of other people. You might live in a 1-bedroom apartment and you don't have anywhere that you can go. Coffee shops are no longer open to have you sit down and do an interview from there. So it makes sense. What I will say is that if you offer up that information and you feel like the interviewer is bothered by that or annoyed by that or makes a comment about it, listen, you probably don't want to work there. So that's also a really important thing for you to realize, is that the way people and companies are showing up in this moment is as important as the way that you are. You're also interviewing those folks. And so if you feel uncomfortable about your situation, or if you are made to feel uncomfortable about your situation, then that's a red flag that might be a place that, after this interview, you might not want to deal with them anymore. And that's okay too. That's actually better to get that signal now than if you onboard with them and then all of a sudden they're not okay with the setup that you have at home, or you can't feel comfortable in any of the meetings that you're in. So important signal there as well.
Great point. And that's also another thing a lot of people forget. You're not just interviewing for a job, you're interviewing for the company, for yourself. It works both ways. It cuts both ways. And that's really where the research and the preparation come in.
For sure.
We have time for one more question. So what I'm going to try to do is combine three questions into one. We have Rosa, Christina, and Sabrina all asking very similar things. We've been talking about internships, entry-level positions, and for folks who are trying to get a position entry-level into one of your companies or another tech company. For those are the folks who are kind of in transition or coming out of a boot camp, or who are just generally want to apply their professional experience into a tech company role. How should they go about it? And do you have any specific tips for them where it's not necessarily entry-level internship, but more along the lines of transition? Deitrick?
Yeah, so it's tough, right? Because coming from a boot camp, you don't necessarily have like a 4-year CS, like strong fundamental knowledge, but you do have a lot of good knowledge from the boot camp because they teach you very heavily the skill sets that you need. I think a lot of companies gear boot camp graduates towards apprenticeship programs because there is still a bigger learning curve than those who go heavily into, algorithms and data structures and design and architecture versus boot camps where it may be a lot more front end heavy focus or like full stack focus and not as deep in the back end side of things. So I would look towards companies that have apprenticeship programs, but know that a lot of companies that start off with apprenticeship programs have limited availability for those positions, right? Because they're starting off, they're trying to scale it out. And it really evolved from companies trying not to make the schools like the only way to get entry-level talent, because there are people transitioning into careers. Like even at Lyft, we doubled our apprenticeship size, but it's still small. It's not going to be able to handle, the thousands of people that are coming out of boot camps. And like Lauren said, you post a position, our apprenticeship program, we got 1,000 applicants within 1 week, right? There's no way that we can supply 1,000 jobs. I would also say reaching out to smaller startups. Sometimes startups are very heavy on, we need senior level people right away because we need people to hit the ground running, but you just never know. I fully agree with, you miss 100% of the shots you do not take. And so you might just want to reach out to those startups and say like, hey, do you have anything for entry level role, whether it be, developing the front end of your website or fixing the back end of your product or something, where I can get the mentorship and guidance. And sometimes they are willing to take that chance. So those are probably avenues to really enter into that space. And I would say a lot of it will have to deal with networking and engaging. So really building out your LinkedIn, working on your personal projects, showcasing them, having them available to showcase as like a portfolio of like, hey, I went to this 12-week boot camp. This is what I learned coming out of it. I've built these things, and I want to show you that I'm capable of doing this work at your company. It's probably the best advice I can give.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's also really important to be able to, especially when you're making a career transition, it's really important for you to really master the narrative of your career, of your transition, of your transferable skills. And again, this sort of goes back to doing the work for us and like telling the story that like you intend to tell. Is really, really important. So if you're doing a career transition, okay, you might not, have you might only have maybe 12 to 18 months of hands-on technical experience, but what else are you bringing to the table that could be of value to that company? If you've worked, 7 or 8 years in you know, another industry, and also you have this 18 months of technical experience. Well, like, what are the transferable skills from the first part of your career that you're bringing over? Do you have management experience or mentorship experience? Do you have trainings in any other sort of thing that makes sense for the company? It's so important for you to recognize the gap that you are potentially, that you need, recognizing the gap that you need to fill, and then filling that gap with the narrative that is most important to the job that you're transitioning into. Because if I can't understand, if I can't see and understand like why you make sense for the job that I'm looking to fill, then chances are I may not spend a lot of time trying to write that narrative myself, you know. So it's really important for you to, and that's where something like a cover letter could come into play, explaining like, hey, I know that I don't hit these requirements, but this is where I make up for it, and really explain to us why you make sense for the job or for a position at Medium or Lyft or wherever. That's really important for you to do. I'm actually working with a friend of mine who's transitioning from a consulting agency into an in-house role, and she did a lot of work on the front end to say, okay, cool, like I know that I don't have the in-house experience that you're looking for, but I've worked with 200 companies over the last 3 years, and I've seen the insides of many different companies, and so therefore I am able to sort of apply what I have learned at all of these companies into something personalized for your specific company, right? So it's all about sort of bridging that gap for people as you're making that transition.
For sure, and all about bridging the gap and making sure you're able to connect that story to that role in that company. It's so crucial and so important. And we've mentioned it 3 or 4 times in the past hour, but it really hones in on how important that is for anyone, no matter what position you're applying to, what role, or what experience level. With that, I wish we could continue, but we are already at 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific. So I really appreciate having Lauren and Deitrick, both of you here to share your perspective and to be with us, share your knowledge and your advice. Thank you so much to both of you. It's really great. And also thank you to our audience who had some really great questions and really involved. We had a question earlier about the recording, so I'm going to be cleaning this up, sending it out on Monday. So just expect that. If you, this will also go up on YouTube sometime next week, probably Monday, Tuesday. So if you missed anything, that'll be the time to get it. And also, if you registered for this event, I will also send with the video Lauren and Deitrick's LinkedIn profile, so you can practice all the stuff that they told you to do in the past hour. And we really mean it. All the stuff that we talked about today is best practices. So if you ever had a question or a concern about it, that's what you should be doing. Watch this video twice and just do all the stuff we told you to do. You'll have a better time connecting with folks, and you'll probably have a greater likelihood of getting a position. And really quickly, very quickly, for those of you who are interested, our next Careers in Tech Roundtable is on October 22nd, and we have one of our good friends from our Career Accelerator, Hillary Gardner from SoundCloud. She is the Director of People and Recruitment, joining us. So with that, thank you all again for your time and for just staying and being engaged and staying with us. Lauren, Deitrick, again, can't thank you both enough. Really amazing.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank
you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good
Take
day,
care,
everybody.
everyone. Bye.